Emily stood in her childhood bedroom with her back against the door, her heart racing so fast it felt like it might leave her chest. The late afternoon sun fell through the thin curtains in soft golden lines, lighting up dust in the air like floating stars. Her mother Laura stood near the bed holding an old wooden box with shaking hands, her face pale, her eyes full of fear and memory. The room smelled faintly of lavender and old paper, and everything felt too quiet, too delicate, as if one loud sound could break the moment forever. Emily had found the box only an hour earlier while searching for winter blankets in the garage. Hidden behind coats that had not been touched in years, the box was scratched and light from age, tied with a faded blue ribbon that looked weak but stubborn. She had known it was important the second she touched it, and when she saw her father Daniel's handwriting on the first letter she opened, her breath had caught in her throat like something invisible had wrapped around it. The words inside were not loud or dramatic, they were soft, full of young hope and shaky promises, and every line carried a quiet pain that Emily had never seen in her father's face before. Without knowing why, she had brought the box straight to her mother, and when Laura saw it, her knees had nearly given out. She had sat on the edge of the bed as if the weight of the past was suddenly too heavy for her to stand. Now they faced each other in silence, daughter and mother, linked by a secret neither of them had ever planned to share. Emily held one letter in her hand but could not bring herself to read it out loud. Laura's eyes stayed locked on the box as if it were a living thing that could still hurt her. Emily finally whispered that she did not mean to find it, that she was sorry, that she would put it back if her mother wanted. But Laura shook her head slowly and said that once the past is touched, it no longer stays asleep. The words felt strange and heavy, and Emily felt a tight ache in her chest she could not explain. They opened the box together, one letter at a time. The paper soft and warm from years of waiting, each letter filled with young dreams, with fear of loss, with promises to return no matter how far life pulled them apart. Emily could see a version of her father she had never known, a man full of fire and doubt and deep love. Laura's hands trembled as she touched the paper. Sometimes she smiled through tears, sometimes her breath caught as if the memory inside the words had reached out and taken hold of her heart again. The room filled with quiet emotion, and time seemed to slow. Then without warning, a sound came from the hallway, a soft step, slow and careful. Emily's whole body went cold. Laura's head snapped up, her eyes wide with fear. They both knew those steps, they belonged to Daniel, the man whose words now lay exposed between them, the man who believed those memories were buried forever. Emily moved without thinking and slipped behind the door as another step came closer. Her heart hammered so fast she thought it might give them away. Laura quickly closed the box and pressed it to her chest as if trying to hide it inside her own body. The footsteps stopped right outside the door, and for one long second, everything stood completely still, even the air felt trapped. Then the door handle shifted with a soft click. The sound felt loud enough to echo through Emily's bones. The door opened only a crack. Just a thin line of light breaking into the room. A shadow stretched across the floor, Daniel's shadow, tall and familiar and suddenly terrifying. Laura stood frozen beside the bed. Emily pressed her hand over her mouth to stop her breath from shaking. Daniel's voice came through the narrow opening, low and calm but carrying a strange weight. He asked if they were inside. Laura answered quickly with a soft yes, trying to keep her voice steady. A pause followed, thick and slow, the kind of pause that holds years inside it. Emily could almost feel her father's eyes trying to see through the small opening, trying to read the truth through silence. Her chest hurt from holding her breath, and every sound felt too sharp. Then Daniel said he thought he heard something strange. Laura forced a gentle laugh and said they were just talking. Another pause followed, and for one terrifying second Emily believed he would open the door wider, that he would see the box, the letters, the truth laid bare between them. But then the shadow moved back. The door closed slowly, carefully, with a soft final sound that felt far louder than the creak that opened it. Footsteps retreated down the hallway, fading one step at a time, leaving behind a silence so deep it rang in Emily's ears. The second the sound was gone, Laura sank onto the edge of the bed as if all the strength had drained from her body at once. The box slipped from her hands and landed gently on the bed. Emily rushed to her mother and wrapped her arms around her without thinking. Laura held her tightly, her body shaking, her breath uneven. Emily could feel the fear still trapped inside her. Laura whispered that Daniel could never know Emily had seen the letters. Not yet, maybe not ever. Emily asked why, her voice small and confused. She said the letters were beautiful and sad and full of real feeling. Laura pulled back and looked at her daughter with eyes filled with old pain and quiet love, and said that some truths come from a time that no longer exists, and when they return they can break the Present into pieces, Emily felt tears slip down her face without her knowing when she had started to cry. She had thought love was something simple that just changed its shape over time. But now she saw it could turn into something quiet and heavy and hidden. That night they ate dinner together as a family like always. Daniel asked Emily about her day. Laura passed the bread across the table. The dishes clinked softly. Laughter even visited the room for a moment. But for Emily everything felt different now. Every look between her parents felt loaded with words that were not being spoken. Every smile felt a little too careful. Every silence felt too loud. She went to bed with her mind full of her father's young promises and her mother's hidden pain, staring at the ceiling as rain began to tap lightly against the window, wondering how something so close could remain unseen for so long, and knowing deep inside that the door opening that afternoon had not been an accident at all, but the first quiet warning that the truth was no longer willing to stay hidden, even if no one was ready for it yet. Morning came too fast for Emily. The pale light slipped through her window and pulled her out of thin sleep, her head still full of the door, the shadow, the letters, the way her mother's hands shook. She lay still for a moment listening to the quiet house. No voices, no footsteps, just the low hum of the heater. She finally rose and dressed slowly, every movement heavy, her mind racing ahead of her body. When she stepped into the hallway she smelled coffee, the normal smell of mornings in this house, but now even that felt strange. She paused near the kitchen and watched through the doorway. Her father sat at the table reading news on his phone. Her mother stood at the counter making eggs, both of them moving like nothing had happened, like the past had not almost burst into the open the day before. Emily took a breath and walked in. Daniel smiled at her and asked if she slept well. She nodded and sat down. Laura placed a plate in front of her like always. Their hands brushed for a second and Laura looked at her with quiet fear hidden behind gentle eyes. The small contact said everything words could not. Daniel talked about work, about traffic, about a meeting later in the day. His voice calm and steady, but Emily noticed his gaze drift often toward Laura, longer than usual, softer than before, as if some old thought had returned without him knowing why. Breakfast passed in soft sounds and safe words, but the room felt tight, like the walls were listening. When Daniel finally left for work, the door closing behind him with a familiar click, the house let out a breath. Laura leaned against the counter as if her legs had turned weak. Emily stood up quickly and went to her, helping her sit. Neither of them spoke for a moment. The weight of what they carried pressed down hard. Laura finally whispered that Daniel had felt something was wrong last night. She saw it in his eyes. Emily asked what would happen if he found out. Laura said she did not know, but not all old fires burn with warmth, some return to destroy. The words scared Emily, because part of her had felt hope in the letters, hope that love could be found again. But her mother saw danger, pain, loss. The box stayed hidden in Laura's room that day, untouched, but its presence filled the house like a quiet storm cloud. Emily tried to lose herself in schoolwork, in music, in messages from friends, but every thought drifted back to the thin gap of the door, to the sound of her father's voice asking if they were inside. Late afternoon came and Laura decided to leave the house for a while. She said she needed air, space from the walls that now felt too close. Emily offered to go with her but Laura said no, that some thoughts need to walk alone. She left with her coat and purse and a tight smile. Emily watched her drive away through the front window with a feeling she could not name. The house became too silent again. Evening fell slow and gray. Daniel returned from work earlier than usual. He looked tired but calm. He asked where Laura was and Emily told him she had gone out for a walk. He nodded but his face stayed thoughtful. They ate dinner, just the two of them, the sound of forks against plates loud in the quiet room. Daniel asked gentle questions about school, about friends, about plans for college, but his voice carried something else under the words, a careful searching. After dinner Daniel sat in the living room instead of going to his study like usual. He flipped through channels without really watching, his eyes often drifting toward the dark hallway that led to Laura's room. Emily felt the air tighten again. When the sound of Laura's car finally reached the driveway, both of them heard it at the same time. Both of them looked up. She entered the house quietly, placed her keys on the table, and came into the living room. Daniel stood up at once and asked if she was all right. Laura said yes and tried to pass him, but he gently reached for her arm. Not forceful, just enough to ask her to stop. The moment stretched. Emily felt frozen in her seat. Daniel said he felt something had shifted between them, that he could not explain it but he could feel it. Laura said she was just tired. Daniel said tired does not feel like this. His voice stayed calm but his eyes held quiet pain. Laura pulled her arm free and said she needed rest. She walked down the hallway and closed her door, not hard, but firm. The sound echoed in the room. Daniel stood still for a long moment, then sat back down slowly. Emily wanted to speak but did not know what words were safe anymore. That night she lay awake again listening to her parents move in their separate rooms. Two people under one roof divided by years of silence. Days passed like this, slow and tight. Laura quiet and distant, Daniel gentle but restless. Emily caught them watching each other when they thought no one saw, their eyes full of questions they were too afraid to ask. The box remained hidden, but its power grew with every passing hour. One evening Emily found her father standing in the garage staring at the old coats, his brows drawn in thought. He asked her if she knew where Laura had put the winter blankets. Emily's heart dropped at once, but she kept her voice steady and said she thought they were still in the garage. Daniel nodded slowly but did not move. His eyes stayed on the shadows between the coats as if he sensed something there once. Something close, something lost. Later that night Emily went to her mother's room, and found her sitting on the edge of the bed, holding one of the letters, not reading it, just holding it like it might vanish if she let go. Laura said she felt the past pulling at her, like a tide she had once escaped but never truly left behind. Emily asked if she still loved Daniel. Laura looked at her for a long time before answering. She said love does not always stay loud, sometimes it hides to survive. Those words stayed with Emily as she returned to her room. The next day Daniel asked Laura if they could talk. Just for a few minutes. Laura hesitated but agreed. Emily hovered near the hallway pretending to look at her phone while listening to their voices drop low. Daniel said he felt like something vital was missing between them, something he could not name but could feel in his bones. Laura tried to brush it away but her voice shook. Daniel said he still remembered who they were before life grew heavy, before silence learned to speak for them. Laura said memory does not always bring healing. Sometimes it only brings ghosts. Daniel said maybe it was time to face the ghosts instead of pretending the house was empty. Their voices rose and fell but never turned sharp, just heavy with years. Emily felt tears build as she listened, knowing it all led back to the box, to the words written by a younger man to a younger woman who had not yet learned fear. The talk ended without peace, only more questions. That night a storm rolled in without warning. Thunder cracked the sky. Rain hit the windows hard. The house trembled with the sound. Emily woke to the storm and to voices rising in the kitchen. She slipped from her bed and moved closer, careful on the cold floor. Daniel said the storm reminded him of a night long ago when they were young and afraid and full of dreams. Laura said the past should stay buried. Daniel said buried things rot. Laura said they can also poison the living when uncovered. Silence followed. Then the sound of a drawer opening. Emily's breath caught in her chest. She knew what Laura was reaching for. Seconds felt like hours. Then Laura's voice broke as she said Daniel's name, not loud, but full of weight. Emily heard the soft sound of paper, the sound of letters touching air again. She pressed her hand to her mouth as if that could quiet her racing heart. Daniel said nothing for what felt like forever. Then he whispered that he thought those words were lost. Laura said she thought so too, but some things refused to disappear. The storm outside grew louder as if the sky itself leaned in to listen. Emily backed away slowly, fear and hope mixing inside her until she could not tell one from the other. She returned to her room and sat on the bed with her knees to her chest, staring at the dark, knowing the box was no longer hidden, knowing the truth had left its cage, knowing whatever came next would change the shape of their family forever. And somewhere deep inside, she felt that the thin crack of that door days ago had only been the beginning of a much wider opening that no one could stop now. The storm left behind a clean sky and a house filled with heavy quiet. Emily woke to soft light and the sound of low voices moving through the walls like distant waves. She dressed fast and stepped into the hall, her heart beating hard with both fear and hope. The kitchen door stood half open and she saw her parents at the table with the letters spread between them like a living thing. Daniel sat with his hands flat on the wood as if steadying himself. Laura sat across from him with eyes red but calm. The air felt charged and new. Emily froze in the doorway but Daniel looked up and gently asked her to come in. She obeyed and took a seat beside him. The moment felt strange and fragile like a glass bridge over deep water. Daniel picked up one letter and spoke in a quiet voice that carried years inside it. He said he had written those words when he was young and afraid and sure that love alone could save everything. Laura listened without turning away, her hands folded tight in her lap. He said life came fast and dreams bent and sometimes they broke. He said he chose silence over fights and distance over risk, and he was sorry for every year that he did not try harder to find his way back to her heart. Laura lifted her face and her voice shook as she answered that she had also chosen fear. That she had hidden hurt behind routine and quiet days. That she had waited for him to speak first, and when he did not, she built walls brick by brick until even she could not see over them. The words moved fast now like a river breaking loose. Daniel said he never stopped loving her but did not know how to reach her anymore. Laura said love can survive in shadows but it becomes small and tired without light. Emily listened with tears running down her face. The letters between them no longer felt like secrets but bridges. Daniel took Laura's hand with care as if asking again for a second chance with no demands attached. Laura did not pull away. Her fingers trembled then closed around his. The simple touch carried more truth than 1,000 quiet years. The room filled with a soft cry that neither of them tried to hide this time. Emily felt her chest loosen as if a knot had finally begun to open. Later that morning they walked together through the house. 3 people relearning the shape of shared space. Daniel opened windows to let fresh air in. Laura made coffee with steady hands. Emily cleaned the table. Small steps that felt like the first steps after a long winter. They talked about small things at first: work, school, weather. Safe words that built a bridge back toward harder ones. By noon they were sitting on the porch watching clouds pass like slow ships. Daniel spoke of the first day he met Laura. The way she had laughed too loud at a bad joke. Laura smiled and shook her head as if seeing that young girl again in her mind. Emily felt like she was meeting her parents for the first time. Not as steady figures but as 2 young hearts that had once raced and feared and dreamed just like her. The afternoon passed with soft truth and careful hope. Then reality knocked quietly. Daniel said rebuilding would not be easy. That years of distance do not vanish with one brave talk. Laura agreed and said trust grows like a seed and they had to water it every day or it would dry and fail. Daniel said he would try with actions not promises. Laura said she would meet him halfway without hiding behind silence. Emily watched their words settle into the air like something alive and learning to breathe. Days rolled into weeks with small changes that mattered. They ate dinner together with real talk instead of safe talk. They walked in the evenings and spoke of fears instead of burying them. Daniel told Laura when work weighed heavy on him. Laura told Daniel when old thoughts returned to shake her calm. Emily saw laughter come back in soft flashes. The house felt warmer and louder and lighter. One night the power went out during a quiet rain. Candles filled the living room with gentle gold. Daniel read aloud from one of the old letters while Laura rested her head against his shoulder. Emily listened with a full heart as words once meant for youth found new life in middle age. Time moved forward with care and patience. Then one evening months later Emily returned from school to find suitcases near the door and her heart dropped at once. Fear rushed in like cold water. Laura came from the hallway and smiled. Daniel followed with amused eyes. They told Emily they were taking a short trip together. Just the 2 of them. A simple road trip to places they had once dreamed of seeing but never had. Emily felt something between worry and joy. Daniel promised they would call every day. Laura promised nothing was being left behind. The goodbye hugs were long and real. When the car pulled away Emily stood in the quiet driveway with a strange peace in her chest. The house felt empty but not broken. The days alone passed with steady rhythm. Homework and simple meals and long evenings with music and thought. Each night a call came from the road. Sometimes laughter filled the line, sometimes quiet talk. Sometimes honest tears. Emily listened and felt proud in ways she had never known before. When her parents returned a week later they looked tired and happy. The kind of tired that comes from facing fear and choosing to walk through it instead of away. Life did not turn perfect. There were still hard talks and quiet days and moments when the past tried to rise again. But now it rose into light instead of shadow. One afternoon long after the storm Emily helped Laura clean the garage. Winter coats moved aside and dust rose in pale clouds. The spot where the box once hid stood empty now. Emily paused there and felt a small smile touch her face. Later she told Daniel how close he had come to seeing everything that day. He listened in silence then shook his head with a soft laugh and said some doors only open when hearts are ready. Laura took his hand and said timing can be cruel but it can also be kind. That night the 3 of them sat on the couch watching an old movie. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just the comfort of shared breath and simple presence. Emily leaned back and felt safe in a way she had not for many years. Not because nothing could ever go wrong again but because she had seen how wrong things could be faced. She thought of the thin crack of that door long ago and how it had felt like the edge of disaster. Now she understood it had been the edge of truth instead. The place where old fear met new courage. And as the screen flickered with soft light she knew that families are not saved by silence or perfect days but by the brave choice to speak even when the voice shakes. And in that simple truth her home had been quietly rebuilt from the inside out.